Well, that definitely is a concern in the community because in New York City, what was that, about 8 years ago, many accused the police and said they rounded up folks in something called kettling. Have you all heard that term? This kettling process is basically where they herd everybody into a group and just put a lasso around it. They also used that, I think, during the Occupy movement when folks tried to march over the Brooklyn Bridge, and they basically put a big lasso of police around it and just rounded everybody up. So there is a concern that not only would they round up people in a big net, but that New York City, that they then kept them for 2 or 3 days, without being able to see a judge, etc. Hopefully we have confidence in our legal system and here and our judges and the state attorney that those types of games won't be played.
Well, and John, just so you know, I mean, the discussions go, as we all know, we also have a homeless population in this county. And so why we talked about perhaps restrictions outside of the immediate area is because there is an anticipation by our office that the homeless population may in fact move into some other areas, and we don't have a way of communicating with that population like we do many other people. And we are concerned that they are going to be more susceptible to being arrested because of a lack of an understanding of what it is that's occurring. And that's why we've had to put in place all these other alternatives of how to move quickly. Running a 24-hour court, or even if we run a court for 12 hours, right now our first appearance court happens 1 time per day, and it happens early in the morning. So if you get arrested at 2 o'clock, you're not seeing anyone till the next day. This second court that we're talking about running at the highest point of where we think people are going to be brought into the system. We're going to have multiple lawyers on both sides, the state attorney's side and the public defender's side, because we do have legal obligations. We have to give the judge information, not just the fact that the person was arrested. Does this person have a prior arrest? Does this person have prior convictions? There's lots of things that have to come forward. We may have a burden to try and contact law enforcement to find out whether or not something was as egregious as it appears. There's differences between battery on a law enforcement officer and battery on a law enforcement officer. We all know the difference. One's the push and one's the hit. So we're going to have to do some work, and that's why you need the 120 lawyers, perhaps in the private lawyers helping, because we're going to need to accumulate information quickly. If I wanted to delay things, I just can tell you, if we wanted to delay things, I'd send 2 lawyers to first appearance court like I do every single day. That's not what we're doing. The commitment is 120 lawyers. And so that is a significant difference. These folks are not going to get paid 1 extra cent because we get paid the salary no matter how many hours we work. So it is a huge commitment that we're talking about making to try and ensure, to the extent that we can, that the things that we've heard about, the nightmare stories we've heard about, don't happen here, at least as it relates to that which I might have an ability to control.
Well, Julie, here's an interesting question from the audience. It says that perhaps your office could apply for part of that $50 million that Jim and Santiago have. And you could use it for overtime, additional public defenders and judges. I don't know if there's really an answer to that, but it was interesting.
Well, thank you for the offer.
Jim, as you know, the westerly border of the clean zone includes the University of Tampa campus, and I think that was done on purpose. Obviously, the UT buildings and campus is an icon, and I'm sure needs to be protected, etc. But the question from the audience says, I'm curious about any rights I may have on UT campus, whether or not I'm a student or a non-student. Has anybody given any thought to that First Amendment freedom of those students or professors on the UT campus, and how this ordinance might relate to that?
My understanding is that the security at UT is controlled by the UT security forces. And so I don't see any, I don't think the city's talking about scheduling any rallies at UT without working with the university, so I wouldn't think they would have anything to worry about.
But as a follow-up, let's say there's a student group on the UT campus that they wanted to organize their own protest rally as part of their campus activities. Do they fall under the ambit of the clean zone ordinance and the restrictions that are there, or do they fall under campus regulations?
Well, our permitting would be for city property. So if they're trying to permit, if they're trying to have an event on University of Tampa property, I would think they would need to work with the university on that.
Okay, fair enough. Got a lot of great questions, and one of them I recognize as my brother's handwriting, so I'm not going to answer that one. Speaking of which, Professor Borelli, when you were there in Philly, probably working for the Justice Department, my brother was on the streets of Philly out there protesting. So, okay. How would the police be able to identify parade participants from bystanders with respect to the 60-minute provision? This is, again, a sort of a practical question that I think all of us might have as we think about the 60-minute provision. So in other words, you know, if I just wander up and I see this rally going on and I say, well, that looks interesting, I'll go over and participate in that rally. And that's you know, group A. And then that 60 minutes goes by, and then the next group B folks come along and they have a permit for the next 60 minutes. You know, I'm just casual Mr. Bystander. Do I have a right to participate in Group A's rally and Group B's rally? How do you differentiate between these groups? If somebody has extra time left over from Group A's rally, can they give it to Group B? I mean, it sounds silly, but there's a lot of real concerns about the practical, you know, practically how this is going to play out. And frankly, I've been inquiring with my peers around the country, and nobody's ever heard of a time limit like a 60-minute limit that the city's thinking about imposing. And I think there really are a lot of practical considerations that I don't know if everybody's really thought out. But any thoughts on that, Jim, or anybody else? I'll take that as an Mauricio helped draft a lot of this. Mauricio, you want to chime in on any of that?
No, I was waiting for the opportunity to follow this question that one of my staff sent me, and she said, don't be afraid to say, I don't know, good question. We'll have to look into that. That's fine.
Thank you, Julia. Well, we're closing in. I'll tell you what, I'm going to break from convention. If anybody has a question they want to raise their hand, they didn't get a chance to write down and ask. But let's keep it polite and respectful, and I'll come over here with the microphone.
Are any of the members of the Republican National Convention also required to get a permit since they're peacefully assembling within the city of Tampa?
Did y'all hear the question?
I did.
The question was that the members of the Republican Convention, who are delegates, I guess, or other participants, are they going to be required to get permits? Jim?
Yeah, the law would apply to everyone.
I'm sorry?
The ordinance would apply to everyone.
Okay.
However, there are some, obviously, areas that are under the control of Secret Service that are part of the convention. But if they wanted to have a parade or have a public gathering, they would have to follow the same rules.
Okay. Let me run down here to, well, actually, this nice lady had a question. Go ahead.
If you're disabled, canes, crutches, gas masks, oxygen masks, how do they apply?
Okay, there is, in the draft ordinance, there's a prohibition against gas masks. And I've been wondering this myself, that if you're particularly sensitive to, you might have respiratory problems and that sort of thing, but you want to go down and protest, and you're worried that you might, somebody else might get gassed and you might suffer from that. So,
I'm a 9/11 worker, so I do have, breathing problems.
it sounds to me, I'm going to suggest that perhaps we might want to create a little medical exception on the gas mask at a minimum. But any other thoughts on that one? Okay. Joe?
Thank you for the my question is this. You guys keep talking about the clean zone. The clean zone goes across the river from the map I saw to Rome Avenue to Columbus Drive. That includes a large swag of public housing. Okay? And in public housing, I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna come out here with all these additional rules. Is that ordinance gonna affect the housing authority's property? Because, you know, they run the hood and all of that. So are they affected? That swath of public housing and all of those? We have an issue with that. The West Tampa people have an issue with that clean zone jumping the river and going into public housing where African Americans are, and a lot of minorities. Okay, I haven't heard that mentioned in this room. So we want to know, is that clean zone going to apply to the hood? Okay? So,
Just to clarify, I mean, the purpose of the clean zone is to keep the citizens of Tampa safe from anybody that might be coming here trying to do some damage or harm. So yeah, it's going to apply in the areas that it ultimately covers. Right now, it's not final, obviously, until City Council makes their decisions. But I would think that anybody on the other side of the river would want the protection of this as well. But they're not going to be going to people's houses and looking for chains and ropes and arresting them. Yeah.
you get the police power, they're going to use it.
All right, here we go. Ron Weaver.
On the proclivity to violence, Professor, with respect to the blog that had violence in the blog that you said is a protected right to get a parade permit, I'm usually in favor of getting people permits, but I also have a family and we have a community. Is there not some limitation with respect to any kind of specificity with respect to that violence indication on the website that might disqualify one from a permit?
You got the question?
I did. I think there are, and I'm not the expert on the ordinance, but I think as a matter of First Amendment law, as a purely constitutional matter, right? So the ultimate limit on the state, not the choices the state has in the interstices. So the ultimate limit on the state, we generally have a doctrine that says unless you can prove likelihood of imminent harm, and the court has been very careful about reading that imminent harm language to project over time. Right? So it certainly is possible that time, place, and manner restrictions can be placed to promote safety and diminish violence for everybody, right? That could include the sorts of concerns you're worried about. I mean, as someone who has a family, I'd be worried about the same things. But in terms of preemptively prohibiting that kind of expression, the doctrines available are difficult. Now, there's also a strict scrutiny standard for content-based restrictions. So if a compelling government interest exists and the government's approach is the most limited approach available to achieve that interest safety, the government has the ability to do that even in content-based restrictions. So the scope of the harm, the facts are going to control. But as a preemptive matter, knowing that a group has advocated violence has generally not been accepted as a reason for denying a permit. And that comes from a lot of cases involving the Communist Party, frankly.
Thank you for the client.
And I can tell that was a discussion between two Ivy League lawyers because it went over my head. So.